just gotta be, you just gotta be, you just gotta be your true self. You just gotta be, you just gotta be, you just gotta be your true self. True self, true self. Tell me true to yourself.
Sorry, I'm just vibing to my brand new theme tune from a brand new YouTube channel. This is my first ever episode of the True Self Project, and I am gassed because I've always wanted to film long form content for you guys. I've been posting content on my other platforms, short form, for so long, and this is where I'm going to go deep, right? I love a deep chat. I love to talk about certain topics, and each week I'm going to be answering 21 questions on a topic that means something to you, to me. And the first topic has to be sobriety, because sobriety was a thing that allowed me to just reach my true potential and unlock my true self, right? I'm finally the most confident I've ever been, the most authentic I've ever been, and it's a fucking superpower, and I want it for everybody. And sobriety allowed me to get there. And we talk a lot in my content about blockages. And my blockage was alcohol, because when I removed alcohol from my life just went like fucking, it just took off. I think that's such a good point to make. When you actually remove a blockage from your life, whether it's a toxic relationship, whether it's a job that you hate, or a bad habit that you know that you shouldn't be doing, but you keep doing it anyway, you suddenly make space for what's right for you. And that's what happened to me. So yeah, we're going to be talking about sobriety. We're going to answer 21 questions, and we're going to go on to the first question right now. So the first question is, how bad was your problem with drinking? Fuck me. It was bad, like to the point that I was going on 3-day benders most weeks. I was out 2 or 3 nights a week, and I had no confidence without alcohol, to the point that I couldn't go to a social event without being steaming. It didn't matter what it was. Like if I had to go to a little event in town for an hour, I'd be getting pissed before I got there, because I felt like I was boring without alcohol. And it just took over my whole life, because I was a professional party boy. And it started off really glamorous. It was my job to be the party starter, to be the promoter who got everybody going and dancing and everything else. But suddenly over time, I started to realize that I wasn't really that comfortable in that environment unless I was drinking or taking drugs. And don't get me wrong, my biggest vice was alcohol. Like I could go on a night out and not get on it. But if it was there, I was going to be the last man standing. I would go out on a Thursday and not come home until Saturday morning sometimes. And it feels like insanity, because that is so far from who I was. And it really frustrated me, because I'd look like this big party boy, but underneath it all, I was struggling. I was waking up in tears. I hated the fact that people thought that's who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. I became the Scottish Special, and that was my alter ego. And I would get arrested multiple times for drunk and disorderly. I'd chase away people who loved me. I'd spend all my money. I've got a gambling addiction through alcohol. It was bad. For anybody who feels like they're in a really bad place right now with alcohol, trust me, you can get yourself out of it, but you have to be honest with your relationship to alcohol and not sugarcoat it. Because even if you're not drinking every day, because I could go a month without drinking, but when I did drink, it'd be like an explosion. It would leave a nasty impact on the rest of my life. So I think step one would be being really honest about your relationship to alcohol. It's okay. Sometimes we all lose ourselves. Don't beat yourself up. But being aware and being honest with yourself and taking ownership is definitely the first step. I've been thinking about this for so many years now, and I've definitely managed to get a bit of a distance on it. And I think the main reason I was drinking was, I think there was 2 reasons. One, it was an escape. I used it as pure escapism, because my mind was constantly in fight or flight mode. And I have been diagnosed with ADHD, but I don't really like to define myself by it. But I was constantly always on and always just overthinking everything. And I think it was like a release valve for me, where I could just literally just explode and not care about anything. But unfortunately, it was those kind of explosions that led to chaos and a train wreck behind me. And another reason why I think I drank was I didn't really like myself much anymore. So I was running away from myself. I couldn't be in my own company. I couldn't spend time on my own. And I always wanted to be around people drinking, because I was running away from myself. So I think those are the main 2 reasons I drank. And I think it's a really good exercise to ask yourself, why do you think you're drinking? What's coming up? What are you running away from? Because once you understand that, you can start to identify ways to do something about it. Listen, there was multiple occasions when I realized that I had to stop drinking. And I mean, I would wake up on most Mondays after saying, last week, I'm never drinking again. I'm never doing this to myself again. And the next minute I'd find myself at a kitchen party at midday in the afternoon with a cup of vodka, smoking cigarettes even though I didn't even smoke, and just taking copious amounts of drugs. Like, I'd always say I'm never doing this again, and I'd be back exactly where I was. And I think nothing really affected me until there's just one time when I got escorted out of a work event. I was at this big exclusive luncheon for my PR agency, the Social PR, which I still have now. And I ended up getting escorted out for being drunk and disorderly, and all my team knew about it, everybody. And I had been the man that year. I'd been so successful in business. I'd put us on the map. And in one night, I lost the whole respect of my team. I nearly lost my business, my biggest client. And I was just thinking, you know what? This is the first time it had got in the way of my potential. I'd damaged relationships before. I'd made a dick of myself. But this is the first time I could see it really holding me back from my true potential. And success meant so much to me that there was no way I was going to let this continue. And that was the time when I decided to go 12 months sober, and it completely transformed my life. Yes, it felt like climbing Mount Everest. You've got to think, right? I didn't know who I was without alcohol or drugs. They had completely defined my whole personality. I was defined by drinking and taking drugs because I was a Scottish special. That was my persona. I even remember going to see my therapist, and I said to him, I can't change. That's who people expect me to be. Those are the words that came out of my mouth. So for me, my biggest fear was like, who am I going to be? Am I going to be boring? I felt like I was going to be boring. That was my biggest fear, to be the boring sober guy. And I think that's why a lot of us don't want to stop drinking, because we feel like we're going to be boring without it. But trust me, I am the most fun I think I've ever been. Not in a sense of like I'm the loudest guy in the room anymore, but I'm just the authentic me. And I think people prefer me being around them now because I give nothing but positive, genuine energy rather than it being artificially something that I've created through drinking drugs, if that makes sense. I always give this advice, and it sounds so simple, but it fucking works. If you want to make a big change in your life, whatever that change is, you need to make one decision, and one that you truly mean. And what I mean by this is, there's so many times when I said I wasn't drinking again. There's so many times when I said I'm never doing this again, but I didn't fucking mean it. But I remember this time when I was in Abu Dhabi, I meant it. Don't get me wrong, I was at rock bottom, but I fucking meant it. And I remember I had goosebumps now because I could remember the feeling. I knew I was going to do it. And I even picked up this pebble and got this pebble upstairs. And I felt the texture because I wanted to remember this texture because I just knew something was different. And that year I went on to completely transform my life. And it sounds so simple, but if you are going to make a big change, you want to go sober, ask yourself, do you really fucking mean it? And do you really want it? And don't wait till you hit rock bottom. Find another reason, find another why. Create a vision for yourself in the future that you're so excited about that it makes you want to make that decision. Because once you make that decision, trust me, everything becomes so much easier. Yes, like there's so many people now that I just don't see anymore. And that's just part of the process. And I even remember this one time where I had this one friend called Brad, who's still my best mate to this day. But every time we were together, we would just cause fucking carnage. It was a 3-day bender every time we went out. And I remember having to ring him and saying, bro, listen, we can't chill together anymore. Every time we're together, it's just chaos. And this is when I knew he was a good friend. He went, bro, I completely get it. Like, you do your thing. And he didn't go sober for a while, right? He is sober now, but he went on his own journey and he did his own thing. And we stayed in contact a little bit, but we didn't spend as much time together. But over time, you end up inspiring those people around you to make positive changes for themselves as well, which is amazing. But you will lose people, and that's fine, because when you are moving in alignment, when you are becoming your true self, sometimes you have to make space for new people, and that means losing some people as well. So don't be scared about losing friends and anything else, because sometimes the only thing you've got in fucking common is drinking and taking drugs. So for me, the first thing that I did was I set myself a goal. And this is my best advice for anybody who goes sober for the first time, especially, is set yourself the goal of getting into the best shape of your life. And what I mean by this is, this isn't about getting a set of abs or anything else. It's about becoming the best version of you physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, just start working on yourself. And if that's a physical goal at first, then so be it, right? Because when you're training, when you're exercising, when you're eating the right foods, you are practicing discipline. And discipline becomes the highest form of self-love. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're all chasing. We want to love ourselves again. We want to like ourselves again. And through getting in the best possible shape, you fill your time because you are training more. you're reading the right books, you're listening to the right podcasts, you're surrounding yourself with people on the same wavelength as you. Like, getting in the best physical shape is my number one advice. And that's where you want to fill your time. It might sound boring, but trust me, there's nothing boring about becoming the best version of yourself. From the 6-month mark of me going sober is when I started to announce it on social media and everything, right? Because I was so sure and so clear in my boundaries that nobody has ever really tried to tempt me to have a drink. Like, literally nobody. Because from the moment I went sober, I had a really strong reason why I was doing it. So if someone asked me, why are you going sober? Oh, Scott, you having a drink tonight? I said, no, I'm not drinking. And they go, why? I went, well, because I wasn't feeling great. I was feeling pretty shit about myself. And if I'm honest, I want to become the best version of myself. I want to reach my potential, and alcohol's massively holding me back. So I'm going to do 12 months sober. It became really difficult for anybody to try and twist my arm because I was so sure of the reasons why I was doing it. So my biggest advice for anybody who's going sober is be really clear and direct with your reason why and protect those boundaries. Because once you're sure, it becomes really difficult for someone to twist your arm and say, get him a shot or get her a shot. Because you know where you're going, and if they're the right people, they'll support you, and if they don't, they shouldn't even be in your life. So this is like one of the biggest questions I always get asked, because people are so petrified of missing out. And when I first went sober, I felt the same. But then I quickly realized I wasn't missing out. Instead of focusing on everything that I'm missing out on, I started to focus on everything that I'm going to gain. So in exchange for 5 hours of craziness, or maybe 10 hours if you are a madman like I was, in exchange for that, you get a full, fresh week, a brand new morning, waking up, training, exercising. You get an opportunity to learn and grow, move your business forward, move your career forward. You gain so much back. And instead of living for the nights, you live for the mornings, you live for the days, you live for the weeks. So instead of focusing on what you're missing out on, ask yourself the question, what are you actually gaining? Because trust me, investing in yourself is worth so much more than just self-sabotaging. Just a little quick break, by the way, because we are halfway through, pretty much. I just wanted to introduce you to Juno. Come here. This is Juno. Hello. Hello, baby. So this is my little baby Juno, by the way. How beautiful is she? Hey? She's not very well at the minute. But she loves the camera. Oh, yeah. And Juno, by the way, has been with me for 5 years, which is pretty much when I went sober. So she's been part of the whole journey. This is a perfect example. I had this girl on my vision board, right? So I had a Doberman on my vision board, and I just was lay there one day thinking, what am I waiting for? I kept seeing it every day. I was like, I just got to take inspired action. So I got Juno, and she's been part of this journey with me, and she taught me so much about myself. But again, like, if I was still drinking and taking drugs and everything else, I wouldn't be a good enough dad to Juno. And yeah, she's a perfect example of everything that's amazing in my life right now. Aren't you, baby? Go on, girl. Do you want to go out? Go on then. This is a really good question, because sometimes when you're going through a tough time, you just want to push the fuck it button. You want to self-sabotage. But what I started to realize was that when I'm going through a tough time, the last thing I want to do is self-sabotage. In fact, I want to be at my strongest. I want to double down. So what I do now is, if I'm going through a tough time or a challenging time, I end up training harder. I end up eating healthier. I end up listening to more motivational clips on YouTube. I've decided now that it's in those darkest times, those troubling times, that I need to be at my strongest. And I think a lot of us have got it all wrong, and myself included. Like, for example, when my dad died, I remember having my first drink in a long time, and it just made everything 10 times worse. Whereas now, if I'm going through a difficult time, the first thing I think is, right, what book can I read? How can I move my body in a way that's going to get those endorphins flowing? How can I do everything I possibly can to be at my strongest? So try and look at it as if it's pretty much insanity wanting to self-destruct in a time when you need to be at your strongest. I think my biggest superpower is the fact that I am now my true self. And that's why this whole YouTube channel is called the True Self Project. Because for years, I didn't know who the fuck I was. I was chasing the crowds. I was trying to be like everybody else. Whereas now I feel authentically me, and I feel so confident in just being me. In any room that I walk into, I can go on stage in front of thousands of people and just like myself and be proud of myself. And I think sobriety has allowed me to do that. And don't get me wrong, it didn't happen overnight. Sobriety allowed me to become self-aware. It allowed me to get back in touch with little Scott, who had been missing for years. And I started to reinvest back into him. And now I'm the person I always wanted to be. So I think being authentic and being my true self has been my biggest gift and my biggest superpower. And that's what I want for everybody now. So let me be really clear. When you go sober for the first time, you are going to have so much unused energy. You're going to be like a ball of energy because you're not going out as much. And you used to spend a lot of time at kitchen parties, dancing around clubs and everything else, right? So now it's all about making sure you transfer that energy into something beneficial for you. So obviously my first step was just going into all things wellness, right? Just looking after myself, going to run clubs, going to the gym, everything like that, playing paddle. But then also one thing I will say is that nothing, and I want to be really honest with you now, nothing will be a straight swap for going out. I think you need to get really used to life in the middle lane. And this was really difficult for me, but it's been the best thing for me as well. Whereas instead of chasing extreme highs now, I've become really comfortable in the middle lane. And don't get me wrong, I still want to drop into the fast lane every now and then. And that's where I get my rush when I'm playing paddle or jumping in cold water or anything like that. But I think it's about being really honest with yourself that nothing's going to be the same as a night out. But actually, long-term happiness comes from being in the middle lane, right? You're still going to get to where you want to get to. You're still going to have a mint life, but you're not chasing extreme highs all the time, because sometimes with extreme highs, there's extreme lows. And your body will be craving that. But the more you tell yourself that actually, no, I'm okay in the middle lane, and I'm okay just doing things that are chilled. And you can still find that rush in certain areas, like I said, like hot saunas, like cold water, like, I don't know, jumping out of a plane if that's what you want to do. You can still find that. But don't think there's going to be anything that's like a straight swap for a night out, because that's just going to set yourself up for a fall. And I know that answer is probably not what you're looking for. But I know when I first went sober, I was always looking for to replace my night out. And I slowly realized over time there is no straight replacement. And as soon as I let go of that expectation, I became a lot happier. And I know the middle lane sounds boring, because it sounded fucking boring to me at first. But actually, when you've been living in fight or flight mode for like the whole of your life, actually finding joy and contentment in the middle lane and your nervous system being calm, you end up starting to love it. So embrace it and stop chasing the extreme highs all the time, because what goes up must come down. Okay, so these next two questions are kind of interlinked, so I'm going to answer them together. And it's the first question is, when you went sober, how did you cope with people calling you boring? And the second question is, how can you be confident in social scenarios, right? And for me, when I first went sober, my biggest fear was being a boring sober guy. Like I was always the party starter. I was always the loudest guy in the room, and I felt like it was my job to get everybody going. But what I started to realize over time is that it was no longer my responsibility to be that guy. And I think as soon as you take that pressure off yourself and let someone else take on that role, you give yourself permission to turn up and show up as your true authentic self. And at first you might feel like that's boring. But what you start to notice over time is that the right people actually prefer you like that, because you're being your true self. You're being actually who you are, which means you're listening to conversations, you're adding value, you're being a better person to being around than just being an absolute balloon and just having surface level relationships. So instead of just thinking you're going to be boring because you're not as loud anymore or you're not dancing on tables, actually you're taking on a new role now, which I think a lot more people will appreciate. And I think in terms of being confident, it's just about looking yourself in the mirror before you're going out and just saying, I don't have to be anybody else for anybody else. I am so sure and confident that I am a good fucking person that I don't need to become somebody else. And trust me, the right people will love you for it. In fact, I've just been to Ibiza with all my mates and I partied with them for 2 days. And they even said to me, Scott, we prefer you like this. And that was the biggest compliment for me. And it's something that I've been working on for years. So I'm just, yeah, it's well worth it when you put the work in. Fuck me. This has been one of the most challenging aspects of being sober, right? Because I always associated dating with drinking. My dates were pretty much nights out. I'd meet a girl at a restaurant, then I'd take her on a tour of Manchester, go to all the nightclubs, sometimes leave her in the nightclubs. And it was always like a mission to almost get almost like an end product at the end of the night. Did I get a kiss? Did I sleep with her? And it was always about that, if I'm honest, because that's what it was like being a lad in Manchester. It was always about how many girls did you sleep with and everything else. And you could go on a date with someone and not really have much in common with them. It would just pretty much be like surface level, because that's what alcohol was for me. It was just all surface level relationships. Now that I'm sober, dating is a lot more intentional. So when I first went sober, I'd go on a few dates and I got it all completely wrong. I'd have a few messages with someone on Instagram. I think that would be enough, and go on a date with them, get there and realize that we had nothing in common. We didn't really connect on much, and it was just a disaster. And not only that, I was in an environment that didn't really work. Like, I was in an environment like a bar or a restaurant, which is based all around alcohol. So automatically you feel like a fish out of water. Whereas what I realize now is that you have to be a lot more intentional. So you have to establish that you've got a good connection. You've got things in common. You have to have maybe a phone call before the date, maybe a few voice notes. Make sure there's a vibe check, right? And then not only that, make sure you go to environments where you take the pressure off everything, right? So whether that's a dog walk, whether that's a coffee date, and even just simple things like when you're sat in a restaurant, maybe sit side by side so it's not as intense. All these things make it so much smoother. And I think my biggest advice is make sure you've got an established connection before the date starts. Make sure you go into the right environments, and also take the pressure off yourself. You don't have to get a kiss at the end of the day. You don't have to get a shack, right? It's just about getting to know someone and establishing a real connection rather than an artificial connection, which was pretty much the whole of my dating history for when I was in my 20s and when I was being this ultimate lad. Well, I feel like I must have intimacy issues or something over the years, because I used to use alcohol to connect with people. I would have deep conversations at kitchen parties, and I'd take so many drugs because I feel like I was craving that. And for years I struggled to do that without alcohol. And it was something that I had to work on, like just being open to people. And again, I think it comes through time, and it comes through patience and confidence. But now I'm feeling a lot more open to connecting with people on an intimate level because I'm a lot more sure of myself. And I feel like when you first go sober, there's going to be foundations that you need to kind of lay to make sure that you are back in touch with who you are and confident with who you are, so that you can then connect with someone else. But one thing I'll say is that it does take time. Don't rush it. You're getting to know you again. You're getting to know the true version of you, your true self. And then once you know who that person is, you will then be open to getting intimate with someone and allowing them to meet that person too. Fucking every emotion. One thing I'll say about sobriety is you have nowhere to run. And that's the scariest thing, right? So when you are having a bad day, when something goes wrong in your life, when something goes right in your life and you want to celebrate or whatever it is, like, you have to deal with all emotions. And that can be challenging at first because it can feel overstimulating, overwhelming. But what you soon start to realize is that you don't have to run away from anything. All these emotions that you are kind of pushing down and everything else, they will come back at some point. And if you don't deal with them, they'll come back in a way that might be a self-sabotage behavior or some kind of self-destruct button, right? But what I realized is now, and I remember doing this, I was in the jacuzzi at David Lloyd and I had all these emotions that I knew I was kind of pushing down. And I just literally sat there and just went, right, okay, hit me. And I just allowed every emotion to hit me. And what I soon realized is that it wasn't that bad. A lot of the time, everything that we're running away from isn't actually that bad. And we're building it up to be something worse than it is. So it might sound challenging, but trust me, when you have the courage and bravery to face your emotions, whatever you're going through, you develop a new sense of strength. And that's where the growth happens, because you are running away from something. You're never dealing with it. You're never going to get stronger. You're never going to earn those scars that allow you to deal with the next thing that comes your way. So instead of running, sit there, let it land, take it in. It's never as bad as you think it's going to be. And trust me, on the other side of it is growth and greatness. Yes. Wow, I wish someone told me this. So when I first stopped drinking, I found myself looking for other self-sabotage behaviors, whether that be vaping, overworking, becoming obsessed with paddle, the gym, because what's happening is you are now transferring that negative self-sabotage behavior onto something else. So my biggest advice is, first of all, be kind to yourself. Know that this is part of the process. Be aware of what's happening. Don't just be on autopilot thinking that this is normal. Why am I doing this again? Why have I got all these different problems? No, it's just the fact that you've not yet got to the root cause of why you're doing a certain behavior. And once you start to understand that over time, you can let go of these self-sabotage behaviors. But one thing I will say is that try and find new healthy obsessions. I don't like to call them addictions because I feel like that's just, they've got so many negative connotations around that word. But try and find something that's going to be a healthy obsession, whether it's running, the gym, whatever it is. Give yourself breathing space in order to do the work to understand what's driving this behavior. Because when you start to understand the root cause of you looking for this self-sabotage, you can start to do something about it. But in the short term, when you first go sober, don't beat yourself up. Just be aware and find new healthy obsessions. I think for me, it was the power of self-awareness and also becoming comfortable in my own skin. For years, I would be the first person to go out, the first person to answer the phone and be on that night out because I was petrified of spending time on my own. And it wasn't until my therapist challenged me one day, he said, I want you to practice spending time on your own. And at first I was like, why? Like this, it sounds like torture. I literally finished work and drive anywhere I could, like my family's house, my friends, my brothers, whatever. I just didn't want to be on my own. And what I realized is over time, like being comfortable in my own company and in my own skin was a superpower. And don't get me wrong, like at first, like a lot of negative thoughts would come up because when you spend time on your own with your own thoughts, a lot of shit comes to the surface, a lot of things that you don't like about yourself, a lot of problems that you've been running from and everything else, and it can feel really uncomfortable. But on the flip side, I also got back in touch with me, little Scott, who had been lost for years. I got back in touch with all the things that I loved about myself and liked about myself, and I started to figure out who I was again. But instead, early on in my sobriety journey, I was petrified of being on my own. I felt like it was the worst thing ever, when in actual fact, the lonely chapter, the time when you're on your own, is when you grow the most and when you learn who you are again. And when you know who you are, you can start to build a life that you're passionate about because you know where you're going. So embrace that lonely chapter, embrace that time on your own, because that's where the growth happens. I think my biggest piece of advice would be listen to your intuition. I've got so many friends who keep ringing me and saying, Scott, I think I might need to cut down drinking, but I don't really know where to start, but I don't really never want to drink again and everything else, right? And they're saying that every time they do drink, something bad happens or they can't get over it, they're full of anxiety and everything else. And if you're watching this video right now, you're probably feeling the same, but you've not done anything about it maybe yet. So my biggest advice is like, listen to your intuition, listen to that feeling and do something about it, because it'll be the best thing you ever do. And you don't have to set yourself a permanent timeline. Set yourself a period of time that you know is going to be long enough for you to see a big enough change in your life, for you to get excited about what you've seen and what you felt. For me, it was a year. I tried 3 months before. I've done a few months here and there and it didn't do it for me. I didn't really get a taste of how great life could be. But after a year, not only did I create behaviors, I created a new life for myself that no matter even if I went drinking again, I knew that this period of my life was so special that I was always going to come back to it. I get goosebumps when I talk about it now, because I felt like I'd been asleep all my life. I felt like I'd been operating at 50% less. I grew more in 6 months and a year than I did in 10 years. And it's because I finally listened to that voice in my head and that feeling in my intuition that I was destined for so much more. The person that stands in front of you today is exactly the person that I could visualize. And trust me, your future self is waiting for you to make that decision as well. For me, I've never liked to put a permanent deadline on anything, which sounds mad, seeing as I've talked about the power of sobriety, how it's transformed my whole life. But saying that I'll never do something again is giving that something more power than I'd like it to have. And I'm all about self-mastery and doing the work and understanding why I am the way I am. And I'd like to think at some point in my life, nothing would have control over me. And that's an idea that I'm working towards. Do I think drinking would add any value to my life? No, not really. But at the same time, I'm all about self-mastery. So I'd like to get to the point in my life where if I really wanted to have a drink, I could pick it up and drop it if I wanted to. Whether or not that will happen, I don't know. But that's what this project is all about, the True Self Project. It's all about doing the work and finding the answers. And we never get to the destination, right? But for me, it's about making the process as enjoyable as possible and putting like firm deadlines on things and saying I'll never do this again and everything else. It becomes too restrictive and hard for me. So I like to just flow. And I like to figure things out as I go. So yeah, hopefully not, but I never rule anything out. Okay, so we've come to the end of the first episode of the True Self Project, and hopefully you've learned something from this video. I've tried to be as honest and as vulnerable as possible. I think that's just in my nature. And I hope you've taken a lot from it. Whether or not you're going sober or not, I hope there's something in there for everybody. I'm going to be answering more questions on loads of different topics over the next 12 months, if I'm honest. And this is just the start of something very special. And I just want to say thank you, because I feel like this is my safe place to be the authentic version of me. And it feels good. This is almost like therapy for me, and hopefully it is for you too, and hopefully you're learning something from it and we're growing together. Please comment below any questions you've got or any takeaways you've got from the episode. Big thank you, big love, and I'll see you next week for another episode of the True Self Project.